The most immediate precursor to Adam Curtis's documentary epics of the 2010s was the three-part series The Trap, which aired in 2007. The Trap is invaluable as it details the contemporary malaise of the 2000s, importantly, pre-GFC, whilst it is vital to emphasize the importance of that event and how much it changed the way people live across our developed worlds, and likely the underdeveloped world also. It is also useful to not overglorify the 21st century prior to it. The Trap is invaluable in distilling the limitations upon freedom and the abject nihilism which was governing the pathologies of the Western subjects at this time in history. What is the titular trap? Well, as Curtis believes, during the Cold War, the American Defense Department was determined to predict human behavior as accurately as possible. Why? Well, in order to determine whether the Soviet Union would plan a nuclear strike or not. Curtis explains how this was the origin, as far as he understands it, of the concept of game theory, the idea that individual behavior can be explained by mathematical algorithms or rules as though they were chemistry or particles. It was a major breakthrough. It trickled down into the social sciences, medical psychology, and perhaps most impactfully, economic theories. Handing the idea of freedom and liberty over to a mathematical equation, a quota, a chart, a quantified goal, was seen to account for the utopian ideals which led to the tyrannical states of the 20th century, such as the aforementioned Soviet Union. People could feel free without having to take substantial risks involving the established political system, risks which, frankly, were not worth it, where the Soviet Union, Mao's China, Pol Pot, or any other 20th century socialist state may have been concerned. Those who were not feeling fulfilled in this system could then take revolutionary drugs, most famously SSRIs, which are allowing people to happily fit the model proposed to them by the society as the ideal persona. This phenomenon has been described as capitalist realism by individuals inspired by, and most famously including Mark Fisher, who I know mentioned Curtis in a lecture I listened to once, not in person obviously, on the internet, seemingly admiring the projects, though dismayed at the conclusions they reach, even if they are plausibly quite true. One of the most compelling moments of The Trap is when Curtis attempts to ask questions of famous anthropologist Napoleon Chagnon about the controversies surrounding his famous studies of the Yanomamo tribe of Venezuela, put forth by other anthropologists in this field. Chagnon storms out of the room after Curtis rather innocuously asks him whether the presence of a film crew which recorded an infamous axe fight could have had an effect on the fight occurring, which to me seems like a rather obvious factor which, if it were not the case, requires a reasonable clarification. Chagnon claims such fights occurred elsewhere, independent of him, and were not recorded, although is frankly vague about this and refrains from going into too much detail either. I note a negative review of this documentary at the time it aired from The Observer's Rachel Cook, who I recognise as a writer whom Fisher once critiqued a piece of on his K-punk blog in the early or mid-2000s. Frankly, Cook strikes me as a node of the establishment who might not be entirely self-aware and wants to stamp out any decisive critiques of it. There comes a point where if someone is, say, yelling, I don't believe them if they claim they are not, in fact, angry. The end message of The Trap is highly progressive. Curtis attempts to appeal to some of the potential of the progressive dreaming without it all being dismissed as the road to Soviet tyranny, for instance, claiming that the Isaiah Berlin-inspired neoliberal New Labour, for example, must not be the sole suffocating system which brings about freedom, and it can't be the case that everyone who claims to feel unfree is in fact psychologically ill. The Trap is one of the most invigorating and important of Curtis's works, featuring explorations of figures as diverse and compelling yet oddly in alignment, such as R.D. Laing, my man, John Nash, Tony Blair, Friedrich Hayek, and Jean-Paul Sartre. Those latter four less, my man. John Nash is okay, but I don't care for A Beautiful Mind, the film, but I guess it's nothing to do with... Well, nothing... He didn't make the film. Enjoy the free part sped up here if you like. More importantly, check it out for real, likely here on YouTube. Don't have a knee-jerk reaction to it as reactionary or anti-liberal or whatever else. It so overtly is not, but I question the sanity of those who not disagree with it, but claim that these are somehow these documentaries, these journalistic conclusions coming from the right. That conclusion bewilders me.